This is the book. It's called More Polar Fleece Pizzazz. It was published in 1997. And the book is still available. There's at least one copy available on a site called Bonanza, and I'll put that link in the description. So what I did was I traced the pattern onto pattern ease. And oops, there's 3 sizes in the book. This happens to be the large. And then I wanted to make it out of wool. So wool is expensive and hard to find unless, I guess, you go online. So what I did was I kind of keep a search when I go to the Goodwill store. And this was somebody's very heavy, kind of picky. I can see why they turned it into Goodwill. But it's a heavy wool. I brought it home, washed it and dried it, and ruined it. So see, I cut it all up. And what I did was cut this mitten out of it. For most of the cutting, you can actually use your ruler and rotary cutter. And when you get around to the curved parts, use this 28mm rotary cutter. It cuts around curves very nicely. And what is nice about that is you can leave it flat against your cutting mat. You're not lifting it up trying to cut it, which distorts it in my opinion. And then the other thing that you need is you have to make sure that you have a right and a left mitten. And so what I do is I put a pin with a round head for one, either the right or the left, and then I put a pin with a flat head in it for the other mitten. That way I don't get them mixed up when I go to sew them, which I have done before. Actually, the pattern is written for Polar Fleece, but I have made these mittens using recycled sweaters that I've picked up at Goodwill. I try to look for ones that have at least 85% wool in them. And then I will make another lining mitten for them out of Polar Fleece, or you can't really find Polar Fleece too much anymore, but a lightweight fleece for the lining. And it seems like that combination, the wool on the outside and the lightweight fleece on the inside, makes for a very nice, comfortable mitten because you don't have the wool against your skin. You have the nice soft fleece, but those 2 layers offer a lot of warmth. After you cut the mitten out, you need to put a couple of construction marks. So I use a white quilting pencil, and I get it wet. I put it on the end of my tongue, and it seems to mark on the wool pretty well. I think you can see that little dot right here. And then there's another dot on the thumb part. So you really need to mark those for construction. The tricky part to sewing the mitten together is when you sew the thumbs together. But what I figured out, because I've made several pairs of these, is I take a pin. So this is that round-headed pin. I put it through the white dot, and this is on the thumb, the actual thumb. And then I put it through the dot that's on the back part, the palm of the mitten. So line that up first. So take your pin, make sure that it comes out through this dot and this, and this dot here. So this dot and this dot. Once you've done that, then what you're going to do, this is the thumb, this is the thumb. Just follow around all the way to your end part here, and she gives you a good illustration, and I'll show you that in the book. And pin it well. You want to pin it probably every ½ an inch because this likes to slip. So pin it every ½ an inch. So I have this pinned. Now it looks like a porcupine. So this is the wrong side of the mitten. That's the right side. And I have pinned it very close together. And the reason for that is when you start to sew, it wants to slip. Now right here, this is the critical part. This is where the thumb meets the palm, and you want it to lie flat. So what I do is I start sewing here, I go all the way around, and it's a 1/4 of an inch seam, and I stop right at that dot there. And then, of course, I've removed all these pins so I'm not stabbing myself. And then when I get to this dot, what I want to do is flatten the mitten out. Now you can see that there's some contour here to the mitten, which you need because that's going to go around your thumb. But when you get to this part, so that you can sew down here, you want to flatten this out, just like that. And then that way you can continue sewing. After you have it sewn, this is what it's going to look like. So this is the part, remember I said it was kind of contoured here. This is the actual separate thumb piece sewn to the palm of the mitten. Right here, right there, is that dot, and I connected that dot to the dot that's on the thumb piece. When I got there, so I came, sewed around. When I got here, I flattened this out so that I could continue sewing all the way down. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim out that excess that's around this thumb here with pinking shears. So you can see I've come to that dot. Can you see that dot there? Now what I need to do is lift the presser foot, and then I'm going to smooth that mitten palm out. So right there, right underneath the needle, is that dot. And this is where you kind of have to smooth all of this flat as you can, and then you're going to pivot the mitten so that you don't want to sew this part down, but you want to pivot it around and make sure that you catch that part. Now that's the part that's against the, that is actually the palm. So I have the palm side up here, and then you want to continue down. This is the part that's going to scooch away from you. So what I do is make sure that that part is up, and then just pivot and continue sewing. Look at the mitten from the right side. So this is the part where if you're going to miss, you're going to miss right in there. That's where the thumb and the palm join together. So before you get clipping or anything like that, make sure that, let's see if I can show you, right there where the thumb joins the palm, there isn't a hole. So this is the mitten sewn, and I'm sorry this is black, but it seems like I make a lot of black mittens for some reason. So this part was all sewn. I double checked to make sure that I had caught right there and didn't have a hole when I turned it. Nope, right there, no hole. So then what you want to do is you want to trim that excess out. And I use pinking shears for two reasons. It helps a round part splay out a little bit, and it also will cut down on fraying, although this wool would be considered felted because I washed it and dried it, so it's not really going to fray. And it's nice and thick. It's going to be nice and warm. This is the illustration that's in the book, full of fuzz, as you can see. And that's the wrong side out, and you can see where that dot is, that construction dot. That's very important that you put that dot on the mitten when you cut it out. Now you're ready to sew the front of the mitten to the back of the mitten, so the palm here, and make sure that it looks like this, that you have two thumbs that are together just like your two thumbs are together, so that you have a right and a left. Left, right. Your next step is to lay the front of the mitten against the palm of the mitten, and you're going to sew up the side opposite the thumb about 4 inches, and the purpose of that is so that you can open it up, lay it flat, and then you're going to draw a chalk line 2 inches from the bottom, and that's where you're going to put the elastic. There are 2 options in the book. One option is for putting elastic in the mitten, and the other option is just for putting ribbing. I don't have a lot of ribbing, so this was a piece that I have left because I save everything for whatever reason. So it wasn't 6 inches wide, so what I did was I just sewed what I had, the widths that I had together, and cut it the length that she tells you, which I think was 8.5 inches. This is a large mitten. And then you want to put that wrong sides together, and then you're going to stitch right along here. And I use a zigzag to stitch that together before I stick it in the mitten. Now, you can mark these mittens with chalk, but as soon as you handle it at all, that chalk comes off, so you lose your line. So my solution to that is to baste it. So I basted it with a thread that I could see, so this is a white thread. And you do that while the mitten is flat, just like if you were going to put elastic along this line. Just baste along that line so that you can see the line when you're ready to sew. Again, my husband didn't want the elastic in here, so I moved on to this step, which is to sew the 2 pieces together, right sides together. And I do use the Wonder Clips when I do that. That saves me getting poked. So all the way around, I'm going to put these 2 pieces together evenly, and then I'm going to stitch them with a 1/4 inch seam. When I come to the section where the thumb seam is, make sure when you're stitching along there that you flatten that out with your fingers, so that eliminates some of the bulk. So you want to basically press that seam open with your fingers when you stitch. Okay, so I have my cuff all set to go. It's seamed and sewn together here. I have the mitten sewn together, and I was careful. This area here, can you see it? Let me see here. So I opened that up when I stitched across it, so there was less bulk. Next, you're going to want to hem the mitten. So it's turned up a 1/2 inch, and then with a straight stitch, you're just going to sew right along here, sew the hem in place. Okay, my mitten is hemmed. So this is the part of the mitten where that has the thumb on that side, so it'd be the palm side. You want to take your cuff that you made, and you're going to slip it over the end of the mitten, and you're going to line up the seam that you put in the ribbing with the back of the mitten, just halfway between just the other side of the thumb. Now you've got this nice line that you basted. See my basting here, my white basting? I'm going to put the edge of the seam of the cuff against that basting line, and then I'm going to pin it when I get some pins here. I'm going to pin it in a couple of places. So see, there's the white line, there's the edge of the cuff, this is the seam of the cuff, and this is the thumb. So I'm on the wrong, or the back side, the palm side of the mitten, and I'm going to then go to the sewing machine, and from this side stitch it. I tried it from the other side and you can't tell where you're going, and it's a mess. So if you stitch it from the wrong side, now if you have a sewing machine with a free arm, you can maybe put this over your free arm. And now this is a large mitten, and it was still not fit over the free arm of my Bernina machine. So I have to struggle a little bit because you have to lay it this way to stitch it. So you kind of stretch and stitch. It works, but you're glad when you're finished. So this is the cuff sewn to the mitten. As you can see, it's a good thing that you have that line of basting there. What you do when you sew it, you're stretching the cuff as you sew it to the mitten, so that when you have it turned right side out, that cuff should draw in the wrist part of the mitten. Get this turned here for you. As I said, these are for my husband, so they're big, they're large. He has a real wide hand, and he has difficulty finding gloves or mittens that are wide enough, so I get the privilege of making them. So here it is. Got the nice cuff. It is pulled in a little bit here at the wrist, but for him it's just fine. Now I made other ones. This one is made from an old sweater that I bought at Goodwill and washed. This does not have a lot of wool in it, just some wool, and as you can see, I've worn it out. So right here, from hanging onto the steering wheel or whatever, so I have to fix that. But the way I made this one is this is lined with fleece. Because I knew that that sweater would not be real warm, I actually cut out the mitten pattern using the sweater, and then cut out the same mitten pattern size using lightweight fleece. And then I sewed the lightweight fleece to the sweater fabric, and then sewed it together as one. So I treated it like it was just one piece of fabric, as you can see. And this has the elastic in it. And that was the instructions that are in the book that show you how to put the elastic in. So what I did then at the end of it was I cut a piece of the same fleece and used it like a binding. So I believe that this is like a, since you don't have to finish the edge of fleece because it doesn't ravel, this was probably a 1-inch piece of fleece, the circumference of the wrist of the mitten. And then I sewed that, and then I sewed it to the outside of the mitten, flipped it over, and stitched in the ditch here to hold it down. So that's one way. This way, this was a really nice, heavy sweater, 100% wool that I washed. So it was really thick once it was washed. So I didn't want to make it any thicker than it was. But I did do the method where I put in elastic. So there's elastic at the wrist here. And then I used fleece for my cuff. It's nice and soft. It's the same weight as this heavy sweater fabric now. So I added a 6-inch fleece cuff to my mittens. And these are actually a little big for me, even though I think I made the small, but they're a little long, so I would even make them shorter, I think, next time. So I hope that this helped you make some mittens. They're a wonderful gift. It's sort of like you're holding somebody's hand when you give them a pair of mittens that you've made. If you have any questions, my email will be in the description below. And I hope you enjoyed this. God bless. Bye-bye.